All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. We're always excited when we get to take a virtual field trip to Toronto, to the Ripley's Aquarium of Canada. It's such an amazing facility with thousands and thousands of amazing animals, marine life to check out. And we always have a lot of fun whenever we join one of their events. So today we're going to meet the sea turtles. But before we do, I just want to give a quick shout out because I can see we have classrooms tuning in on YouTube already. Don't forget, you can get on the action, use the chat sidebar, let us know where you're hanging out from, send us in some questions, and we'll make sure that we work those in. And we've got an awesome group of classrooms joining us from across North America. So it's going to be a lot of fun today. So like I mentioned, we're going to be hanging out at the Ripley's Aquarium of Canada. We're going to check out a little sea turtle enrichment and feeding. We're going to be joined by Danielle, who will be hosting, and Melanie, who will be working with the sea turtle. So I'm going to make sure that we've got all the microphones turned on. And Danielle, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. We good to go?
All right, it's awesome to have you, and we are ready.
Awesome. So hello, everyone. Like Joe said, my name is Danielle. I'm working here at Ripley's Aquarium of Canada. I'm joined by Mel, one of our aquarists that takes care of our beautiful green sea turtles, and a very special guest you can see swimming along here. This is one of our green sea turtles, nicknamed Spot, and we do have another one named Chewy, but she is currently out in the tank. So we are going to get started with Spot's feeding and enrichment. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about sea turtles in general. So Mel's going to get started. So you're going to see her ringing this bell underwater. Now that's Spot's first cue that it's feeding time. And now Mel is putting in a target. So it's just a PCV pipe with a little yellow picture on the end. And Spot has learned that if she swims up and taps this target, she'll get rewarded with her food. So what she's getting for lunch today is some nice green leaf lettuce. So if you guys like your veggies and salad, this is what you would be eating as well. And then she does have a little bit of protein there on the bottom. I think it's some squid and some clam. So she gets a nice varied diet, and Mel just throws it right into the water for her to eat. And we'll move the target around just to keep it interesting and make sure that Spot keeps swimming along to her target there to get fed. So what we're looking at as well, this is the Acclamation Pool. We're behind the scenes in the aquarium, and this pool is in the back area, and it opens up into Dangerous Lagoon, which is our largest tunnel tank with all our large sharks, our green sea turtles, our sawfish as well. So just out into that area is where Dangerous Lagoon is, and the sharks are currently being fed out there, and we like to bring Spot back here just to make sure she is not distracted by all the feeding going on out there, and she can do her target training here. So green sea turtles are one of 7 species of sea turtle. It's actually the second largest. The first largest sea turtle is the leatherback, but green sea turtles are the largest hard shell because the leatherback has a soft shell. And green sea turtles are part of the reptile group of animals, meaning that they're cold-blooded. They have to breathe with lungs and come up for air, and they have scales as well. Those are some of their features, and they also lay eggs. So you might be wondering why they get the name green sea turtle, and it's not because the color of their shell. As you'll see, her shell isn't really green. It's more of like a brown, gray, kind of black olive color. They can vary. Our other sea turtle has a bit of a darker shell, but they get their name green sea turtle because of the greenish color of their fat. So inside their body, their fat is actually a green color, and that has a lot to do with their diet. So when green sea turtles are young, they have a varied diet, just like Spot's getting, that has both protein and plants. So they would eat things like crustaceans and worms and plankton and seagrass. So they're omnivores, eating both animals and plant matter. But as they grow into their adult phase, they become herbivores or vegetarians. So they eat things like seagrass and algae. So that's why we feed Spot the lettuce. And she also sometimes gets bok choy and carrots and sweet potato and Brussels sprouts as well. And they have very, very sharp serrated jaws that help tear this vegetation. You'll see it's kind of beak-like. So you don't want to get your fingers too close, which is why Mel is just dropping the food into the water there. So we think Spot is about 20 years old, so that's still fairly young for a green sea turtle. They're very long living. They can live past 80 years. So Spot is like maybe a teenager in turtle years, and they can grow very large. So they can have a length of 3 to 4 feet or around 100 centimeters of their carapace or their shell, and they can weigh 200 to 400 pounds. And we think Spot is around 200, so she's still fairly small, even though she doesn't look that small to me. And once they reach about 16 to 20, they become sexually mature, and they can start breeding and having hatchlings or baby turtles. So green turtles can lay about 100 eggs. They're about the size of a golf ball, and it takes 60 days for them to incubate. So the female sea turtles will come up onto the beach and dig their nest using their strong hind flippers that we can see there. Makes them excellent swimmers. And they'll lay their eggs, and they'll cover their nest, and they will go back into the ocean and never see their babies again. But the cool thing is that they usually return to the beaches where they were born. So we're not exactly sure how they know this, if it's something, if they have like kind of an internal clock that leads them back to those their natal beaches, so where they were born. And another really cool thing about sea turtles and their breeding is that the sex or the gender of sea turtles is dependent from the temperature. So if it's a really, really hot hot day and the sand is really, really hot, it's more likely that the baby sea turtles will be female. So if it's around 31 degrees Celsius, most of those eggs will turn into female sea turtles. But if it's a little cooler and it's about 26 degrees Celsius, most of those sea turtles will be male. And around 27 is the perfect number, and you'll get kind of 50-50. So that's pretty interesting, but also might cause some problems for the sea turtle, especially with climate change and increasing temperatures. If it's too hot or too cold, we'll get an uneven ratio. So we might end up with more female sea turtles or more male, and then that will impact their ability to breed and reproduce and sustain their populations. Now, since we're talking a little bit about male and female, you might be wondering, how do you tell a male and female green sea turtle apart? So Spot here is a female, and males would have a longer tail. So you can't even really see Spot's tail, but it's short. There it is. And if she was a male, she would have a longer tail. And another way to tell is that their front claw, which is on their flipper on the front, is more pronounced or more defined in the males as well. So that's how you kind of tell a male and female sea turtle apart. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about some conservation. So we talked a little bit about how climate change and temperature might impact our turtles, but they are facing a lot of other threats as well. And unfortunately, I think it's 6 out of 7 of our sea turtles, including the green sea turtle, are on the endangered list. And that can be due to climate change, which we talked about, but also habitat loss. So I mentioned that the female sea turtles need to come up onto the beaches to lay their eggs. But if those beaches are either full of litter and trash or overpopulated or even maybe non-existent anymore, if we've built over those beaches, then our sea turtles won't have anywhere to lay their eggs and carry on their population. Another issue for our sea turtles is light pollution, which kind of has to do with overpopulating our beaches as well. So when baby sea turtles or hatchlings are hatched and ready to return to the ocean, the way they do that is by following the light of the moon that reflects off the water. So if there's lots of houses on the beach or lots of light, they might get disoriented or confused and end up going the wrong way, and they might not make it into the ocean. And lastly, our sea turtles are also impacted by bycatch, which has to do with our fishing industry. So sometimes they get tangled in our fishing nets, and since they need to breathe air, they're unable to come up for air and breathe. But that being said, there are a lot of things that we and you can do to help make sure that our sea turtles do stick around for many generations. So some things that we can do is help out and do beach cleanups. So even if it's the lake here, I know there's no sea turtles, but there are other creatures that do get impacted by garbage. So we could do shoreline cleanups. We can reduce our waste, reduce our plastic use, and make sure we're using reusable items like a reusable water bottle, reusable straws, or we can say no to straws if you don't need them. Another thing we can do is make sure we're not supporting any turtle products. So another way that turtles are being harmed is by sometimes their shells are sold for jewelry or ornaments. So just make sure we're not buying those products there. So what you see Mel doing now is she's using a little scrubby brush, and she is scratching Spot's shell, which Spot very much enjoys. So all the different parts on her shell or her carapace are called scoops, and they do shed. So this kind of feels like a nice little back rub for Spot, and it might get any algae or any parasites or anything that might be growing on her carapace or her shell off. So it feels really nice. This is also part of her little enrichment treatment that she gets back here as well. So that is pretty much all I want to say about Spot and our green sea turtles. So I would love to hear any questions from you guys.
All right, very cool. Looks like Spot is thoroughly enjoying that little back scratch. Very cool. And Danielle, thank you so much for a great lesson. I think you hit a really great summary of the green sea turtle and its ecology. So that was awesome. Thank you so much. All right, let's start meeting some classrooms. Before we do, I want to give a quick shout out to our YouTube classroom. So I know we have St. Patrick's in Kapuskasing, Ontario joining us. So welcome to the event. And then I want to also shout out to Miss Stokes' first graders hanging out in Hanover, Virginia. So any other classrooms joining us, don't forget to use the chat sidebar and send us in some questions. But for now, let's go live. Let's start off in West Kelowna, British Columbia. We have some second and third graders hanging out with Mr. Warcott. Let me get their microphone turned on. There it is. How are we doing, British Columbia?
We're doing great. Yep. Okay. Atlin's going to ask a question. Go ahead, Atlin.
Do you have any baby sea turtles?
Good question. We do not have any baby sea turtles. We only have Spot and Chewy, which are both around 20 years old. So it's a little bit tricky because, like I said, sea turtles go to their native beaches to nest and lay eggs. And this is not where their native beach is. And they are both female as well. So we do not have any baby sea turtles.
All right. Good question to get us started. Let's take a little trip now to Ottawa, Ontario. We've got Mrs. Daminosco's third graders hanging out with us. Let's get that turned on. How are we doing, third graders?
Hi.
Yo!
What is the smallest species of turtles?
Good question. So the smallest species of turtle, I believe, is one of the Ridley turtles. So it's either the olive Ridley turtle or the Kemp Ridley. I'm pretty sure it's the olive Ridley turtle.
All right, so the olive Ridley, very cool. If you have time, check that up online. One time when I was in Mexico, I came across some babies olive Ridleys hatching on the beach, which was really cool to see. And they were definitely really small, but that's because they were babies. Okay, let's go to Mrs. Reed's group. They are in Algonquin, fifth graders hanging out with us. Let's get that microphone turned on. How we doing, fifth graders?
How big can green turtles how big can turtles be?
Yeah, so green sea turtles, like I said, are the second largest, and average their carapace length, so the length of her shell, it can be 3 to 4 feet, and they can weigh, the range I have here is about 200 to 420 pounds. So I would say Spot is on the smaller average size, but they can get a lot bigger. And the leatherback, which is the largest green sea turtle, or largest sea turtle, can be massive, meters long.
Yeah, and well over 1,000 pounds. That's pretty wild. That's a big turtle. Mrs. Palmer, Kalispell, Montana, third graders hanging out with us. Let's get their microphone turned on. How we doing, Montana?
Good. Have you ever swam with sea turtles?
I have. I've been very fortunate. I was actually diving in this dangerous lagoon this morning. I was scrubbing some of our decor, but I've also been fortunate to work with the olive Ridley sea turtle in Costa Rica.
All right. Very cool and very lucky. We're going to go back to Kelowna, BC, but with a different group this time. We have some high schoolers hanging out with Mr. McGarva and Mrs. Tether. Let me get their microphone turned on. How we doing, boys and girls?
Hello, everyone. They're a little shy for some reason. Any questions?
Okay. Does anybody have a question?
What's the difference between a snapping turtle and a sea turtle?
What's the difference between a snapping turtle and a sea turtle?
Yep.
So they're, well, first of all, a sea turtle is a sea turtle, so you would find it in the ocean. They would live in different ecosystems, different parts of the world. Snapping turtle is freshwater, more on land and freshwater ecosystems, and much smaller, but they're both turtles, so they're both in the reptile family or group of animals, so they have all those shared features of a reptile.
All right. So I know, Danielle, that sea turtles cannot pull their legs and arms inside of their shell, but do you know offhand if snapping turtles can do it?
Oh, that's another good feature. Yeah. So our sea turtles, any sea turtles can't hide in their shell. I believe snapping turtles can. Any land turtle, tortoise can hide in their shell, but sea turtles cannot.
All right. Very cool. Let's see. We need to go to Mrs. Anderson's group, fifth graders, hanging out with us in Stonington. Let's get that microphone turned on. There it is. How we doing, boys and girls? We just caught part of that. Can you try and come a little closer? Maybe a little louder? I'm not sure if your microphone just isn't cooperating, Mrs. Anderson, but can you try and maybe repeat it? Huh. Danielle, you didn't catch that, right?
No, I couldn't hear that.
All right. Mrs. Anderson, do you mind? There's a chat bar right at the bottom. It looks kind of like a speech bubble. Just type the question for us. We can hear it, but it's really quiet. So I don't know what the microphone's up to. But while we wait for that question, we're going to go to Mrs. Tully Heron's group in Brantford, Ontario, some first and second graders. Let's get that microphone turned on. How are we doing?
So we have two friends in here who think this is a pretty cool day because they're both Mohawk Turtle Clan, and we've been all about the turtles today. And then we have a question at the back.
Can the sea turtles breathe underwater?
Can the sea turtles breathe underwater?
No, so sea turtles need to come up for air. They have lungs like we do, and they breathe air. but they can hold their breath for hours and hours. But you'll notice she sticks her nose or her face out of water and takes the breath.
Okay, so they can hold their breath for a while, but they can definitely not stay there. They need to come up. So we did get that question from Mrs. Anderson's group. And one of the students is wondering, they heard that the sea turtles have really strong jaws. Have you ever heard of a case of a sea turtle biting a human?
You are right that they do have very, very strong jaws. They're serrated. It's very kind of beak-like. I personally don't know anyone who's been bit by a sea turtle, but I'm sure it's happened. Mel's saying that she has gotten close, but it's definitely on accident, especially because we're feeding them and putting our hands sometimes close to their mouth.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that they're sneaking around looking for toes in the ocean. All right, so I'm going to jump on to YouTube because we have a few questions that'll come in via YouTube. Let's see. We have a question from Mrs. Stokes' group. They're wondering, actually we'll do a two-parter. Mrs. Tremblay's group is wondering on average how many eggs they lay. This is Emma asking. And Mrs. Stokes' class wants to know if the turtles ever float on their back.
So on average, the green sea turtle, their clutch size, that's what it's called when they lay their eggs, is about 100 eggs. And I forgot to mention before, out of those 100 eggs, only about 1%, so one or two of those little baby hatchlings will survive to adult size, which is pretty sad, but it's why they lay so many eggs, because at least one or two of them will survive. And sorry, what was the second question?
If the turtles ever float on their back.
No, that wouldn't be a normal behavior. I've never seen our turtles do that. I'm sure maybe it has happened, but that's not normally what they do now.
All right. So Danielle, I think we have time to squeeze in maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So I'm going to open things up. If you have another question in your class, give me a wave and I'll make sure that we try to visit a couple more classrooms. Ms. Anderson, I see your class waving. If you want to type another one to me, I can make sure we get that in, but let's go back to Mr. Warkoch's group. I can see tons of waving in there, so we better go.
Come up here, come up more. Come quick, quick. Okay, quick, ask.
Nice and loud for us.
Here, has the turtle that you guys are scrubbing, have it ever been out of the gate?
Yeah, so Spot doesn't normally live back here. This is just where she gets her food and enrichment. So normally this gate over here is open. Let's see if I can kind of give you a little peek out. So it opens up to this huge tank. This is our dangerous lagoon. It's over 200 million liters of water, so it's massive. So normally this gate isn't here and Spot would be swimming out there. And if she wanted to, she can come hang out back here. Normally though, she's out in the larger part of the tank.
All right, very cool. That was good timing. We got to see a sand tiger cruise by, which is pretty cool. Mrs. Anderson's wondering, her class is wondering about the depth they can dive to. Do you know how deep a green sea turtle can go?
I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I'll ask Mel. Maybe she'll know. Mel, do you know how deep green sea turtles can dive? What's the average they live? No, we're not totally sure, but typically they live in mostly like shallower areas where seagrass beds would be growing or coral reefs. So that's typically around like 10 meters. I'm sure maybe they could go deeper than that, but again, I'm not totally sure.
All right, well, that's a perfect challenge for our classrooms after they get off to do a little Google research and find out how deep a green sea turtle can go. All right, where should I go next? Does someone else have another question? We still have a little bit of time. All right, let's try. I see someone sitting right up front, Mrs. Deminasco's group. So I'm going to go back there and turn their mic on.
So there's this like blonde animal. What was not a sea turtle? What was that? Yeah, it swam by.
Did you see it in the big tank or the little one?
the big tank.
Okay, did it look big or small?
It was big.
Okay.
No.
Oh, so you saw something swimming by when I went over there. So I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it could have been one of our sharks. So we have some sand tiger sharks, sandbar sharks, nurse sharks, sawfish, and our sea turtles, a stingray, and then lots and lots of fish. So it could have been one of our sharks we saw swim by.
Yeah, I think it was one of the sand tigers. There's a nice big one that came cruising by right when you showed us the view into the tank. All right, Mrs. Tully Heron, let me turn yours on one more time.
Okay, go ahead, Isabella. What's their biggest enemy? Turtles, what's their biggest enemy?
Good question. So since they have their nice, hard, protective shell, turtles have very few predators. I'd say their biggest enemy is probably humans, but sometimes sharks will try and eat sea turtles, but they have to be big sharks in order to crack open that hard shell.
All right, good question. Mrs. Reed's class, do you guys have a follow-up?
How do turtles communicate?
Good question. Mel, do you know how turtles communicate? So we're not sure. We don't think sea turtles don't do a lot of communication like us humans do. That's a good question. That might be something you should Google and find out, because I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, so we'll check that out on Google, but my guess from what I've seen is maybe posturing. I think they can kind of show different postures and such to kind of show how they're feeling. But it's definitely a good question to dive deeper into. And we'll check in one more time with Mr. McGarva's group and see if they have one more for us before we wrap up today.
Anyone?
Are the strong things real?
Are turtles edible?
Okay, that's a fair question. They're wondering about the sea turtles and if they're edible. Does anybody hunt the sea turtles?
Yes, unfortunately, that is one of their threats. So there is something called turtle soup. So in parts of the world, sea turtles are consumed, and their eggs are also consumed as a delicacy in some parts of the world as well. But it is a big issue, especially and illegal, since these animals are on the endangered list. So they definitely should be not be hunted. It's actually illegal, and they should be protected.
All right. And I just want to add too, we had an event a few weeks ago with a researcher who studies hawksbill sea turtles, and he shared with us that their shells over the years have been highly prized for jewelry. So another thing that affects sharks or sea turtles sometimes is their shells, especially the hawksbill, for jewelry. And Danielle, we'll get one more from you from online. And to wrap up this class, Ms. Tremblay's group is wondering if turtles sleep, and if so, how do they do it?
Yeah, so turtles are limited again by their time they can hold their breath, but they definitely do rest. It might not be sleeping kind of how humans sleep. They don't fully shut down their whole body, but they definitely do. I see Spot, who has this one little spot she likes to rest in the cave portion of our tank, so it's a little bit darker, and she goes down to sleep or rest in that dark corner there, maybe for like a couple hours at a time, but again, she's gonna have to come up to get her air.
All right. Well, I want to start off with a huge shout out to YouTube. Thank you to the classrooms who were tuning in today and sent us in some questions. Thank you to our classrooms joining us on camera. We had a nice group of classrooms, pretty much coast to coast, which is always a lot of fun. So thanks for your great questions. Thank you to Spot. Spot, you did amazing with your enrichment today. And Melanie and Danielle, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us today and teach us more about the green sea turtles.
Definitely, it was our pleasure. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you learned something new about the green sea turtle.
All All right. Well, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the mics on, boys and girls. If you want to get loud, a big goodbye and thank you. So Spot hears it as well. Here we go. Job. I have no doubt that Spot heard that in the holding tank. So again, thanks so much, everybody. Tons of fun. We look forward to our next event from the Ripley's Aquarium. Thanks so much.